Hello New Zealand, it's the 26th of February, this is Daybreak and this is your morning wake-up call. Good morning to you. Right, we've got a lot of stories to get through this morning. Actually, when I first thought about this Daybreak concept, I thought, we're going to have enough stories. What are we going to talk about? Well, there's no shortage, as we've quickly found out. So let's go through some of the stories that have been in the media and maybe just need a little bit of explanation. Firstly, we've got the arsons happening in Masterton. Now, once again, media are sort of giving a little bit of coverage. I saw about 20 seconds on One News last night, but this is the thing they are not talking about. They aren't mentioning these words, hate crime. They're not talking about the offender, what the motive is. Now that's the key. What is the motive of the person who attacked 7 churches in Masterton? You won't hear what the motive is. Now, I think I may know what the motive is, and it doesn't fit the media narrative, so watch this space. But you won't hear anything about the offender. You won't hear about Christophobia. You won't hear about racism or the churches being a marginalised community, that they need more support for churches against the vitriol and hate, that we need more funding for Bible in schools so that we can counter the bigotry. It's almost like the churches caught fire themselves. And we're not hearing anything that you would normally hear if there was a skid mark on a rainbow crossing or a LGBT flag had been burnt or, something like that. So it's interesting to watch this story and how the media are really avoiding any mention of hate crime and even talking about the offender. This was an interesting story over the weekend that I meant to talk to you about last time. Medicinal cannabis companies want to come into New Zealand, and according to this article, and stuff, they want to open up with retail outlets, including vape shops. Bad combination. You know how many vape shops there are around? They've popped up everywhere. The government struggled to control them. And now medicinal cannabis companies from Australia want to use vape shops as a advertising point, a starting point. Now remember, medicinal cannabis can only be given by prescription legally. So therefore, it should be at a medical centre. But no, they are contacting vape shops with talking about passive incomes and saying this is basically giving them some financial compensation for it. And the interesting thing is that this company from Australia actually got in trouble in Australia because some of the stores were actually giving medicinal cannabis. For example, they gave it to a son who had schizophrenia and was at risk of psychosis. And there was another one where there was mental health issues as well. So that's the kind of cowboy, unregulated medicinal cannabis. And, it's, as we warned, big marijuana wanting to come in more interested in the money than actually about the health of people. Speaking of that, Radio New Zealand actually did an interview with an American correspondent, someone who used to work in New Zealand in the media, lessons from the US on cannabis. This was on Sunday morning on Radio New Zealand, and guess what the report said? Said that legalisation had been a disaster. Increased use, increased THC, so that's the harmful element of cannabis. Hadn't been good reports at all. They hadn't been able to control the black market. In other words, everything that we warned about during the referendum. And so you won't have seen any media coverage of this particular podcast. We just stumbled across it. Somebody sent it to me. But of course, they sort of don't want to talk about the negative information coming out of the US. New Zealand made a very good decision in 2020 to say nope to dope. There's continued focus on charities. Obviously, the protest by Destiny has sort of turned the light back on that, but the government was already targeting charities, thinking that they can make lots of tax money from charities because apparently charities are making huge profits and they're doing very well out of it. What they don't tell you is that the profits made from charities go back into charitable work. This article in the New Zealand Herald starts off, the profit made on every breakfast bowl of Weet-Bix is tax exempt. Well, yeah, it's tax exempt because Sanitarium is a charity and all their profits go back into charitable work. Under current rules, New Zealand charities are allowed to run businesses as long as the profits are not for personal gain, correct? This means the government gives up millions in tax revenue from charities. The problem with this whole argument, well, there's two problems. The first problem is that it fails to take into account the huge amount of work and benefit that charities give to society, including the volunteer hours as well. And we know that, think of all the food banks, think of all the ministries that churches are doing, taking in, for example, people who may be involved in the mental health system, and they're working with them. And so they're saving actually the government money. Churches do, and charities in general, do this work very well. I was involved in a charity that worked in local schools with at-risk kids. And so this can be much more efficient than what the government can do. So you've got to take into account the value that charities add before you just think about the tax. But here's my warning to people who think, oh yeah, we should tax charities. There's a very liberal church in Auckland Central called St. Matthew's in the city. And it has a car park next door to it, and it makes huge money, fantastic money from this car park, which helps fund the church. If you start taxing charities and churches, then you're going to start taxing also pet projects that you like, left-wing, liberal types of charities who also make money to survive. I think we should just let charities live and let live, and acknowledge that even if we disagree with them, they are putting money back into society, and society benefits from charities, and that's really what matters. But unfortunately, the government seems obsessed with this money income. Now, this story, a letter has been sent to health professionals, and it's by Inflection Point New Zealand. The Inflection Point New Zealand is an organisation that describes itself against the gender indoctrination and medicalisation of children. Very good organisation. Simon O'Connor and I spoke at the conference last year. It was called a controversial conference. Why? Well, because the media and gender activists disagreed with it. That's the only controversy about it. But Inflection Point New Zealand have sent a letter to health professionals warning them about offering gender-affirming care, and that it could go against New Zealand law requirements. Well, it does. We already know that. Health New Zealand reviewed puberty blockers, and what did they say? They said they can't guarantee its efficacy, that it's effective, and they also can't guarantee its safety. So why are we prescribing things to children when we can't guarantee that they're effective and they're safe? This is actually called experimentation on children, and in fact Health New Zealand should stop prescribing puberty blockers until they can prove beyond doubt, because how does a child give informed consent when even Health New Zealand and the health authorities can't guarantee the safety of the drug? COVID inquiry stuff, aren't too keen on the second COVID inquiry that's happening at the moment, so they did this poll, and it wasn't going too well. Late last night, and I checked this morning, 65% support having a phase 2 COVID inquiry, only 32% against. So I'm not sure that Stuff will keep that poll up on their website. Speaking of trust in media, I've just done a blog that we published yesterday, but it's as a result of a survey that city councils commissioned, and one of the questions they asked was trust in media, and you'll see there that the trust in media has dropped to 27%. Now that's lower than the AUT study last year that sort of rocked the media when it said that only a third of us trust the media. It's now down to 27% trust. So that's quite a drop. This story was also in the media this week. Phil Twyford, the Labour MP, he had a whole lot of rubbish dumped outside his office, so he immediately made the connection to Destiny Church. How? Well, nobody knows. He's just immediately jumped to that conclusion. And if jumping to conclusion was a sport, Phil Twyford would be very fit. And unfortunately, it's often what activists do. Chanel Lyle was a classic at it. He would make claims about what was happening at Bethlehem College, or that he was left death threats after the conversion therapy law was passed, a deliberate slight against groups like us. And when I went to the media, or when complaints were made to the media about, well, did they check to see that the claims were credible? and objective, and the media would just say, oh no, we just went on the claims of the person. And that's exactly what's happening in this story. It's a spurious claim. There's no proof yet. Well, let's watch. Let's see if any proof does come out. Now, just 2 stories to finish with. This is in the New Zealand Herald this morning. The rise of trad wife movement reflects a youth shift to conservative values. It's a bit of a panic piece. Let me just read a little bit of it. A few years ago, commentators and analysts often raised the idea of a youth quake. Young, first-time left-leaning voters coming in and shaking up the political landscape. And, you know, it was because of the school strikes for climate, the rise of politicians like Jacinda Ardern, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, Chloe Schwarbrick, all that type of stuff, the youth quake. But recently, there has been a shift to more conservative views among our youngest voters. A yearning for the good old days has seen a trend such as trad wives, and a return to traditional family values skyrocket online. According to a Harvard youth poll, the US youngest voters, aged 18 to 24, say they're more conservative than the cohort that's just a bit older. The younger generation of men is more likely to identify as conservative than liberal. Auckland University of Technology senior lecturer in communication studies Christina Vogels told the Front Page, which is the New Zealand Herald, she's not surprised, but she's alarmed. I've done some work on young women and this growing trend towards the conservative and the far right. And it matches with what's happening with young men. Talks about the rise of Jordan Peterson, men's liberation movement, but she says what we are seeing at the moment is it's being complemented by the rise in young women taking on conservative gender roles. We see this particularly through the trad wife movement, which dovetails with the far right women's movement, she said. The trad wife movement has gained increasing popularity since 2020 and depicts a woman who believes in and practices traditional gender roles and marriage. But Vogels, the Auckland University of Technology senior lecturer in communication, is hopeful history will repeat itself and we will come out of this. Well, I'm not sure we are going to come out of this, fortunately, because here's my final story for you. According to the 2024 American Family Survey, which was just released, young liberal women are significantly less likely to report life satisfaction compared to their conservative peers. 37% of conservative women report being completely satisfied with their life, 37%. But for liberal women, 12%. Yep, liberal women are almost 3 times more likely than conservative women to experience loneliness multiple times a week. And the Institute for Family Studies concludes that there's 2 factors. This graph's interesting. You'll see there that conservatives are far more likely to be married, and they're far more likely to go to church. And so the report says liberal young women are less likely to be integrated into core American institutions, marriage and religion, that lend meaning, direction, and a sense of solidarity to women's lives. Just finally, Brad Wilcox, who I've interviewed on Family Matters, who is a sociology professor at the University of Virginia and fellow at the Institute for Family Studies, said, we've seen in research that conservative women tend to be more likely to embrace a sense of agency and to have the sense that they are not in any way the victim of larger structural realities of forces. They're also less likely to catastrophize about public events and concerns and more likely to think of themselves as captains of their own fate. And for the church attendance, conservative women again took the lead for religious attendance, with over half reporting attending church weekly compared to just 12% of liberal women. So there we are, good news. If you're conservative, you're going to be happy. If you're liberal, you might want to rethink your views. Now, just a quick advertisement. Thursday night, Simon O'Connor is swanning around overseas having a well-deserved break, and so Rodney Hyde is going to be my panellist on Political Playback tomorrow night. Thursday at 5 o'clock, we'll talk all things political from an unapologetic and uncompromising conservative viewpoint. That's it for Daybreak today. Hope you have a great day.